Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Home Tech podcast. This one, very special live edition from ISE in Amsterdam. We have Jason Griffin. Jason, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Seth. How are you?
I'm living it up in Florida. It's 80 degrees. And how's Amsterdam, man?
It's great. It's certainly not 80 degrees. It's a little bit cold, and haven't seen the sun in a few days, but we're having a great time. It really is an awesome show. My first time coming out here, and I have to say I really hope to make this an annual thing. It's just an amazing show. Obviously, a lot of commercial technology in addition to residential, so there's a bit more, I would say, noise if you're really focused on the home. Obviously, that's great for people who cross over and do both, and I'm sure there's a lot of those. But for me as a home technology professional, still an awesome show. Really, size-wise, just dwarfs CEDIA. So it's a lot of walking, and you really have to be strategic kind of about lining out your day and who you're going to talk to and when, because you can just spend half your time sort of traversing back and forth in the convention center.
Right. Yeah. So ISE, Integrated Systems Europe, is a combination of two shows that we have here in the States. Infocom, which is like a major commercial show. This is where you see all of the mixing boards for live sound events and light show type things and video signage and all that stuff. And CEDIA, which is more residential type things, like, home theaters and that home theaters, lighting control, stuff made for the house. So This has got to be a pretty big show.
Yeah, it is massive, but like I said, really exciting, and you've got all the usual suspects here that you would see at CEDIA, and of course a lot of others that you wouldn't, and so that's been one of the exciting things for me, is just to get some exposure to some different technologies and things that are popular over here in Europe that we just don't get to see in the U.S. So I've had a lot of fun checking that out, and we're gonna dive in and talk about quite a few of those things here, of course, on this episode. But before we dive in, we've got a few sponsors that we really want to give a quick thanks to for making this trip possible. We literally would not be here covering the show from Amsterdam were it not for them. And so first we want to thank Krika. And Krika is a company that makes an RSM, or remote systems management appliance, to do remote supervision of networks. And really great company, a couple of good guys there. Really want to, again, thank them for making the trip possible. They're doing some interesting things that we're gonna talk more in detail about what they're doing on our ISE wrap-up show, which will be next week, episode 148, and we'll have, of course, feature a soundbite from them off of the show floor and talk about some of the things that make them unique. But a very cool product. Secondly, want to thank a company called Zapidi, who also co-sponsored the trip over here, and they make actually a very cool media server product. Very affordably priced when you compare it to some other solutions out there on the market, and really has a lot of the same sort of feature set. So 4K HDR, the ability to store movies on a central server like a NAS drive, and really a cool product. They've gotten a ton of people at the booth every time I go by there. Both these guys, Krika and Zapidi, have had a lot of attention paid to their booths, which is great. So I'm excited for them. And again, we'll talk about both of those companies in a little more detail and feature some sound bites from them on episode 148, which will be our wrap-up episode. And then we did have a third sponsor come on to help support our cause over here as home technology professionals covering ISE, and that is the Z-Wave Alliance. And so we really appreciate Z-Wave's generous support of our trip over here. And of course, I'm sure everybody listening is very familiar with Z-Wave, and we look forward to discussing more about what they're doing specifically right now and what sort of recent news, but really good presence over at the Z-Wave booth as well. So again, just want to send a huge thank you to all three of our sponsors for the trip. That's Krika, Zapidi, and Z-Wave as well.
Yep. Thank you very much. We do appreciate it, and it's made the trip possible. It definitely wouldn't be there without them. So maybe next year we can both get out there. I kind of have my hands full this week.
Yes, you do.
With both the newborn baby and I was actually had to fly out to Phoenix for work. So I've been on the road for at least one day to do some work stuff and have some meetings there, actually in Phoenix. So Got a little bit of vacation, not quite like Amsterdam, but Phoenix, I
Yeah.
forget how much I like the desert. It's pretty nice out there.
Yeah, it's where I grew up, and it's a great place
Oh yeah.
this time of year, especially really nice time to be out in Arizona during the winter. So that's great.
Yeah, beautiful out there. I'm gonna have to get back for sure. So, let's talk some ISE, man. This is a very European show, and you probably noticed all the square light switches and
Yep.
square outlets that they have. What's your takeaway from ISE? The initial impression,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah, that's been one of my favorite things, like I alluded to see out here, is just some of the different sort of not only functionally different, but just some of the different design aesthetics that you see over here in Europe, and just kind of drawing some inspiration from the things that they do out here. I really do like the square look, and I don't know if that's just because it's something different. We're used to I'm used to Decora style rectangular switches, and so maybe this is just something novel and newer to me. I've certainly seen them before around and online and things like that, but yeah, there's just a different, I think, level of attention to the design of some of these keypads, and there's a lot of them that are using like a capacitive touch glass approach, and
Cool.
just really seeing those everywhere, and I really just I think they're cool. I have to say that back home in the States, certainly a lot of the projects that I've worked on, particularly even at the higher end where there's interior designers and things like that, I just wonder how much exposure they may have had to these sort of solutions, and would love to see some more of that make its way over to the States, at least as an inspiration. It doesn't necessarily have to switch the form factor, and I know we've got back boxes and things that we have to think about in terms of the shape of it, but I think generally just the styling and attention to detail here, they've got us beat over in Europe on that.
For sure. Yeah, I've always noticed that. The European finishes, I mean, you see that work its way into like even like plumbing fixture specifications and lighting fixture specifications. But yeah, the keypads that go on the wall and trim for outlets, and we really don't have quite the attention to detail. So very happy. There's a couple of tweets that you put out about all the keypads you saw, like a wall of keypads, and it's. I mean, you take that and bring it to CEDIA. I guarantee you, people would be hanging around that booth like for hours. It would be packed because we just don't have anything like that.
Yep, and a lot of those keypads are being displayed over in like the KNX area, which is a company that I should say an association would probably be the more accurate way to describe it. But really, I wanted to learn a little more about KNX. I've heard of it numerous times, and I just didn't really, admittedly, have a great understanding coming into the trip. If KNX was a manufacturer, or what they were, and I think the closest thing that I might compare them to, I guess in a very loose sense, would be like Z-Wave. So it's kind of like an alliance built around this very long-standing protocol. I think 26 years is what they were saying. Started with like 5 companies that kind of came together and said, hey, we're doing similar things, and let's figure out a way to make this a standard protocol. So really that's what KNX is. It's a 2-wire bus communication protocol. It's been around for 26 years, started with 5 companies, and I think they're touting 400 plus now. So very widely adopted and very, very popular. I understand here, continental Europe mostly, not quite as common, I understand, over in the UK, and certainly not as common in the US. But it was fun to chat with those guys and get a little bit of a better understanding. And it is very widely adopted here. And I always sort of thought of it as like a lighting control protocol, but as it turns out, it's very common with other things like window treatments and climate control, and even getting into some entertainment type devices as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I know, especially in the area that you're in right now, and throughout like Germany, that's kind of almost the standard protocol. And they haven't had anything over there like say Control 4 or anything up until recently. I mean, Control 4 hasn't been in the market for very long, so KNX has had just a foothold, especially throughout the Bavarian type countries and throughout Germany. I know that gets spec'd quite a bit. It's almost that it gets spec'd as a from the builder, from the architect.
I lost you.
Oh, here's Skype. Let's see. I can still hear you.
I'm not sure if you can hear me, Seth. I cannot hear you.
I can hear you. Let's see if we can get this thing to come back. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, it's Skype.
It's a network issue. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I lost you kind of where you were saying it's a very common protocol over here.
And I was just saying that let's see, it's almost spec'd by the builders and architect, like out of the gate.
Right.
You're going to have some of the stuff built into the house from the ground up, which over here we do not have.
Right. That's very true. You still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I thought I lost you again. Yeah, that's very true. And I spoke with them and asked them the question, honestly, why, what their thoughts were on why KNX really hadn't seen more penetration in the States. And they do have, sort of the way they're structured. It's kind of by country. So they have people that head up, KNX UK, KNX Europe, however they do that. And I did chat with a gentleman from KNX US, and we'll have a soundbite from him on the next episode. So we won't spend too much more time talking about it here, but it was interesting to have that conversation and understand the technology a little bit better. Right next door to their booth was HDL, which was another company that I've heard of numerous times and wanted to get a better understanding of them as well, just because they're another one we just don't see much of in the States. And so learned a little about them. They're actually a Chinese company. KNX is one protocol that they use, but they also have their own like Bus Pro and I think Bus Pro Wireless were the other two. So a couple of different protocols that they use. Tons of those keypads that we were talking about on display there, and was interesting to chat with those guys. They're my impression was they're very focused on bringing sophisticated automation solutions to market at a very sort of competitive price point that would allow people who may not otherwise be able to have this really nice automation with these beautiful keypads and all that in their homes. And so I understand they're pretty popular over here, and also chatted with them about potentially coming to the U.S. and we'll probably share some more thoughts on that on our next episode.
Yeah, I know that that's the company that Chris Campbell over at #LiveInstall has really talked to us about, and it mentions almost every time. I think it's one of his core brands that he uses for his installs. And every time we talk about it, I go over to the website, and it's one of those like just sighs, like I wish we had access to this stuff because it would be so nice.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. A lot of DIN rail stuff. You see the DIN rail form factor everywhere here, and that's something that I like that form factor, and I'm still trying to. I haven't been able to get a straight answer. Nobody seems to really know why that form factor is so specific to Europe. I think maybe it's a space thing. Space is at much more of a premium over here. Generally, I would say all the restaurants I've gone to are very small, and I think that's more common over here. I just think people have had to adapt to using smaller spaces, and I think DIN rail lends itself well to that. I actually stopped by the Lutron booth and took a picture of Lutron Homeworks QS DIN rail system. I thought that was kind of interesting to see that as in that different form factor. I'm just so used to seeing the bigger, dimming modules here, or I should say they're back in the States. And so that's just another one of those little quirks, right, that you get exposed to when you come over here to ISE. And it's definitely caught my attention. Yeah,
the Control 4's lighting control system, I think, is all DIN rail based.
Do they?
But
it's certainly not. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's definitely not the same though. Like what you're talking about is, I mean, like I could point to Luxone, which is another automation system, lighting control system, whatever, they have, I mean, the entire processor that you have just mounts onto a DIN rail. Like you could put the processor for your home automation and your lighting control like almost on the same rail if you wanted to. I mean, don't listen to me. I don't know how this stuff designs out, but it all looks like it fits on the same rail. So it's a completely different way of thinking about things. And like you said, you like it, I like it. I don't know why we don't have more of it over here, because it just makes more sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's certainly not that you don't see it at all. I know just personally, anecdotally, worked on a project out in Los Angeles towards the end of my time living and working out there that they had some lighting control that had actually been spec'd by a previous integrator, and they were using Crestron DIN rail modules. So you do see it in the States from time to time, but yeah, just a very popular form factor over here. There was one specific keypad, Seth. I don't know if you saw me post this. It had this touch glass that's so popular over here, but they can do like fully customizable wall plates. It's a company called Contech, Israeli company, I believe, and really, really cool looking product. I chatted with them for a while, got a soundbite from them as well that we'll share on one of our wrap up conversations. But they're just very nice, beautiful looking keypads that can be completely customized. He told me that one gentleman from Bahrain stopped by and asked him if it was possible to have the wall plate plated in gold, solid gold around the edges. And wow. And he laughed and said, yes, we can definitely do that. So yeah, so that was kind of cool. Basalt obviously is another company that I think our listeners will have heard of before. They're probably the most present in the U.S. in terms of certainly in terms of that square form factor, very high end design, high quality materials. Certainly on the more expensive side for keypads, but really, really beautiful product. And got to chat with those guys. They've actually got a new media server solution that they have branched into doing some audio stuff, just as a way to talk to them about that, as a way to extend that Basalt experience. They've got these beautiful interfaces, and so it's natural to think about, well, how else can we use these as not so much just as a lighting control system, but what other ways can we expand that? So they were showing that, and they've got some sort of custom wall mount speakers that work over CobraNet that were kind of interesting. So cool to catch up with those guys and see what they're up to.
Yeah, CobraNet is a audio over IP. Well, it's not really IP, but it's audio over Ethernet type of. It's network audio, I guess, is the best way I can. There's a couple of those out there in the high end and commercial, high end pro audio and commercial realm that you will see slowly filtering their way down into to home audio. I like CobraNet. There's another one out there, Dante, I think, that Dante, I like a little bit better. Yeah. So hopefully we'll see some of those kind of like the video, the massive amount of video over IP, the HDMI/HD over IP solutions that we've seen for video and video matrices. Hopefully we'll see that for audio as well. It lend itself to the flexibility and upgradability, expandability, I guess, of those types of systems in the future.
Right. One other kind of cool wall plate I saw, and I was thinking about this, sent a tweet out, and I was thinking there's probably I'm assuming there are similar solutions in the U.S., but maybe just didn't have quite the visual appeal. But it was a square data wall jack that actually doubled as a Wi-Fi access point. And so they were touting this as a solution that was good for like hotels and hospitality and things like that. But I was talking to the guys and saying, actually that's kind of a nice solution even for high-end residential, right? Because we're just always sort of struggling with that conversation about where do we hide equipment, and Wi-Fi access points are usually not that difficult to tuck those into a closet or something. But every now and then you may just have some condition where you'd like to have Wi-Fi out in the middle of the room, and if you've got some data cabling there, to have a wall jack that you could put in that just basically looks like a plug-in data jack, but actually has power over Ethernet, and it acts as a Wi-Fi access point. I thought that was pretty neat, kind of a cool concept. I'll have to dig in and see. There may very well may be solutions similar to that in the U.S., but this one sort of caught my eye. It had that nice, again, that European look, glass finish, so really a nice looking wall plate. And so I'm sure, like I said, there are likely solutions like that in the U.S. Sounds like you know of some, but they've probably got that just very utility look. And so it'd be nice to have something with a little better style to it, you know?
Yeah, very much so. The one I'm thinking of right offhand is the Ubiquity has one for their Unify line that I've used quite a bit. Like you said, if you just need to have, like I had a client that had an exercise machine. They have one of these new fancy ones with the like the Android tablets on them where they can sit there and they can bicycle and be in kind of like a spinning class without being in the spinning class.
Yep.
The thing wouldn't get online because the access point was 2 walls away. Well, I just swapped out an outlet in the room, and it has like you said, it has PoE out on it, and like a pass through. Doesn't look near as good as what you're describing.
Yeah,
but it looks well enough, and it gets Wi-Fi in the room, gets the job done. So I really can't complain too much.
Sure. Well, moving on here a little bit, I certainly wanted to make sure I came out here, and we spent a lot of time on the show talking about home control and all of that. But at our core in our industry, we're AV guys still. We do a ton of that, and it's always fun to come out to these shows and take a look at some of the higher end luxury AV sort of products. And I definitely spent some time doing that. In fact, my very first stop on the show floor this year was at Sony, and wanted to stop and see if they had the OLEDs. And incidentally, they did not have them down on the floor. But one of the gentlemen that I'm staying here with had an appointment with his rep and invited me to join. And they had like a little, I don't want to call it, it was just a little more like of a private area. It wasn't like a VIP thing necessarily, but it was more, I think, just set up for some of their like point products. So to give that a little bit of context, because this is ISE and very much a commercial show, everything down on the floor that Sony was showing was very like solution oriented. So, corporate solutions and this sort of thing. And so they did have the OLED there, and they were showing it, but it was up off the floor in a little more private area. So I'm happy to say I got a chance to take a look at the Sony OLED, and am not surprised to report that it looked really, really nice. So I'm excited about that.
Cool. Yeah, me too. Can't wait to see those things.
Yeah, so that was cool. They had the Z series, of course, which we talked about at CEDIA. That's a really nice TV. They had also a room set up where they were showing a ultra short throw 4K projector, which was pretty neat. It's certainly not cheap. It's about $25,000, but for a 4K projector, that's not certainly not out of the realm of what you would expect to pay for that. And they had it built into like a custom piece of furniture from Salamander. You know those guys?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They do like the custom AV furniture solutions. So they had it built into a console below the screen, and it was really just kind of a cool solution. I'm actually looking at a project back home right now where the client is talking about wanting a ultra short throw projector that comes up out of the floor and then can go back down into the floor when he's not using it. And this thing certainly would take a lot of customization and figuring out, but it looked like it could fit the bill. So from a personal perspective, it was kind of cool to see that and take some notes, and just generally a pretty neat technology. My understanding is that price is about half of what their previous option was. So it's coming down significantly.
It was in like a white cabinet with a wavy front to it, like really like a modern looking cabinet.
So this one was in a darker colored cabinet. I think there's a picture we could point some people to. I can pull it up here without getting myself too sidetracked. I'll pull it up as we're chatting here in a minute. Sorry, I'll mention where that's at. But it was up in a room that was sort of set up to look like a media room. So had a sofa and dim lighting and all of this. So you kind of got to experience it in context as opposed to having it down on the floor. So it was kind of neat to have a chance to go up and see what Sony was doing up there, and had a good time doing that. Speaking of demos, I actually just today, a couple hours before we're recording here, stopped by to check out the Steinway Lingdorf demo, and those guys are We won't go into all the details. I got a soundbite from them, and we'll talk more specifically about what they're doing on our wrap-up episode. But really, a brand obviously is very, very committed to quality, and their demos. I went and saw one at CEDIA as well, and they just never cease to amaze me. The dedication there, to putting out a high quality audio components that provide a really great experience. I think they're one of the companies that stands out to me. There's a couple of other ones that I'm hoping to get to tomorrow. It's just amazing how quick the week goes by, and trade shows are always like this. You just have this target list coming into it of things you want to do, and try as hard as you can. You never feel like you get to all of them. So, basically just saying a couple other high-end audio companies out here that I'm hoping to go check out. Meyer Sound being one of them. I've heard a lot of good things about them. For better or worse, they're doing their demo offsite at a hotel. I understand the reasoning there, but it certainly makes it a little bit more of a logistical challenge to get over there and check that out. But I'm hoping to go see that, and Meridian is another one that is on my list.
Well, color me jealous on those two, especially the Meyer one. Meyer is coming in at I think that's the one that's coming in at the super high end part of the market where
yeah,
they're going to be super disruptive. I think on that side, because Meyer is an extremely old live sound company. I love using their speakers when I was doing live sound way back in the day. Just really, really nice technology and speaker technology. So I can't wait to see what they can do with the home theater. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yep. I'm hoping to get over there tomorrow. I just got to try to move a couple of things around and try to make that happen. But speaking of high end, I did stop by and chat with a couple of the more well-known projection screen manufacturers. I think that in this day and age, we're just hearing so much about technologies like OLED and advances in LED TVs and this sort of thing. But I just really do believe that two-piece projection has a very important place in the market for the right project and the right client. And there's just something more cinematic to me about sitting and watching a movie in a projection room. So I wanted to make it a point to understand what's going on in that market and what are some of the latest innovations that are happening, and posted a tweet of this today, and people definitely should go check this out on our Twitter handle at HomeTech Podcast. The Screen Innovations has a new model called the Transformer. Did you see this video I posted, Seth?
I saw it, and I can't figure out how it's working. So you've got to describe this, because the video is a little dark and I can't really see what's moving. But
it was tough. Yeah, I took a few different videos to try and get a better capture it a little bit better, but just with the iPhone camera and the lighting in the booth, it was difficult. But, so you're presumably familiar with the concept of masking. I think most of our listeners probably are, but just in case, the idea is you've got different movies and different aspect ratios. So 16:9 versus 2:3:5. Those are pretty much two of the bigger ones. And so, if you get a screen, for instance, I've done a couple of them that have motorized masking. So the screen is fixed at a ratio of 2:3:5, and then if you happen to turn on a movie that's in 16:9, you'll just have like these kind of blank areas off to the side of the screen that just don't look that great. And the way that motorized masking works is through an automation system or some sort of control input. You could trigger those the black felt, to come down on the sides to sort of cover up the blank areas of the screen when they're not in use. And that's a pretty sophisticated, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, this is what you see in movie theaters. You don't notice it because it's on this massive screen, but it happens. Watch between the ads and when the movie starts, you will see the masking bump up and down. I mean,
good point.
Good point. It's there too. So this is replicating what you get at the movie screen, at the movie theaters for a movie experience.
Yeah. It's just about covering up the unused parts of the screen, just to make it look a little bit nicer. But what Screen Innovations has done is actually made a screen, as the name implies, that the screen itself transforms. So it literally shrinks in. The sides come in if you're watching 16:9. And then if you have a 2:3:5 movie, the screen actually physically grows out to the sides. And I don't know exactly how that works.
Is it like rubber? Like what are they using rollers?
So,
this is crazy.
So I may go back by and dig a little bit deeper because a couple people have asked me that, and my assumption, I just didn't dig into it too much because I'm assuming what's happening is on the sides, the screen fabric itself is on a roller. I would imagine
that makes sense.
And so when it's compressing in to 16.9, I'm sure that extra fabric is just going onto a little roller system of some sort, and then the frame. Maybe like a sleeve type of system, so it's sort of just one side is sliding into the other to allow for that contraction. So
that makes sense.
Really, really cool. Very, very cool product. I'd heard about it a few weeks ago. Our rep came in and was telling us about it, and this was my first chance to see it in person. So that was pretty neat. They've got some other stuff that we'll go into when we do our show next week. The other company I stopped by is Stewart Film Screen. Obviously, long time staple in the high end home theater business in particular, and it was good to chat with them. One of their bigger things that they're showing off this year is the Phantom HALR or Haler. I'm not sure how they prefer that to be pronounced, but it's high ambient light rejection is what that stands for, and so it's a screen that really excels in environments where you may have. Where you may not have the ability to completely control the lighting conditions, which is super important because it's pretty rare, right, Seth, that we get these opportunities to work on theaters where it really is a dedicated theater and we have the ability to completely control the light conditions. Is more often the case that we're making compromises in that regard. So to have the ability to do ambient light rejection is very important, and this screen kind of takes it to a different level.
Yeah. Most theaters, you like, oh, I want to have a theater room, and you walk in, and there's two French doors with windows, and it's like, oh man, this is going to be painful.
Yeah. So there's some advanced things there we'll get into, but it can be rollable. So I understand that's been a challenge with ambient light rejecting screens prior because they use a more rigid material, so they can't. Previously couldn't go on a roller system. They had to be a fixed screen that was attached to the wall as opposed to something that would drop down out of the ceiling. So that's pretty neat that you have the ability to do that. They can make bigger sizes and a few other things. So we'll get into that. But it was fun just to stop by and see what's going on in the world of projection screens. It's easy to think about those, I think, as just like a white piece of fabric that you shine a projector on, right? But when you dive into it, it's actually a pretty fascinating world.
Yeah.
What they do with that stuff.
Yep. Did you see any cool projectors rather than the screens?
So that's one thing I haven't, and I probably need to just prioritize and make some time to go look at the projectors themselves. I did spend some time looking at those at CEDIA, so it just hasn't been a huge priority of mine. But one thing I have seen that calls to mind, which is kind of cool, is like. I've seen a number of people doing this, so sort of interactive projection where, like, just as an example, there was one I posted a picture of that's on our blog where it was a bunch of projectors shining on a wall, and it was like a giant piano image, so like piano keys on a wall, and you could walk up and there were sensors that could tell where you were pushing, and so you could actually play like these piano keys, and they were just projecting them on a wall. So
you're
right?
You and Chris Gamble are going to have to get out there and do like the big thing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Chopsticks. Yeah. I like that. Sony had a similar thing they were showing where you could just, the context that they were showing it was kind of like an architecture table. So there was a projector shining down on the table, and you could sort of move pieces of the house around and stuff like that. And so the neat thing about that, obviously, is that you can turn any surface into like an interactive type of service.
Cool.
A surface, I should say. And Christie Digital Projection had some of the coolest ones I saw. So posted some pictures on Twitter today at HomeTech Podcast. They had, and these weren't just projectors. They had an OLED wall that you could it was sort of like Minority Report, right? Where you go up and kind of move things around. So giant touch screen, and one with like the use case that they were showing had like planets on it and these little physical objects that the table could recognize as different planets, and then you could set them down and kind of move them around. And so I don't know what the exact use case would be. The thing that jumped to my mind might be sort of an educational tool for younger, maybe elementary school children to kind of learn about different things. And so just sort of conceptual things that make you think. And they had a virtual foosball table that I thought was kind of funny. So it was your typical foosball table and two guys standing there playing and spinning the things to kick the ball around. But there was nothing inside of it. It was just a screen. And so it was just a sort of virtual foosball table. So just, those are kind of silly examples, but just some cool things going on with display technology that I think the commercial aspect of the show sort of lends itself to seeing some of that sort of thing that maybe you may or may not get an opportunity to look at a show like CEDIA.
Yeah. That sounds very fast. This could really up the game of beer pong, I think.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, could just be pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah, that's funny. I could see uses in the home, I think, where again the idea of sort of turning any surface into a control point, where maybe small projectors are projecting different things on the wall that help you control your climate or something like that. Who knows? Very, very conceptual, obviously, but really, really neat to see.
Very cool. Well, we're running short on our time here. I'm sure you saw some of the major announcements from Control4, Crestron. What are the control system guys doing out there?
Yeah. So we'll talk more in depth about this next week. So that's a good point. Let's move through these pretty quick. But yeah, I have had opportunities to speak with really all the big home automation control companies, I would say. I think that's a fair way to put it anyways. So Control4, Crestron, Savant. Made it a point to chat with Elon this year. I've been hearing more and more about them. I think that if I recall correctly, Seth, you have some experience with that company. Am I recalling that correctly?
Yeah, no, I've programmed Elon for a very long time, and I've been trained on their newer systems too. So the going all the way back to the Z keypads and Z controllers, all the way till to the most recent stuff. So it's an interesting, completely different product than what it used to be, but it's still an interesting system.
That's what I've heard, and I just have to admit, I just have never taken the time to dig in and learn more about those guys. So it was fun to chat with them. It seems like they've got a nice system in terms of the programming that gives you sort of that template-based, easy-to-program approach if you want it, but also still the ability to get in there and do some customization and things like that if you're so inclined. And so having that balance, I think, is really important. I think that's a difficult thing for companies to achieve, but I do think that more companies are getting there. Crestron, spoke with John Clancy over there, who's heading up residential. I was glad he was here because really he is the guy that came in and after we heard about Crestron pulling out of CEDIA. That was obviously a huge story, and I think that kind of led to John, as he sort of saw that as a call to action, and he talked about that in the soundbite that we'll feature next week, and getting back in there and really, I don't know if restructuring maybe an overstated way to put it, but just sort of refocusing internal resources at Crestron on residential. They were showing a lot of residential solutions, including voice integration, Sonos, ping, new updates to their programming software. So it was really interesting to chat with him and gave him an opportunity to address some of those, concerns out there in the dealer base about what Crestron's dedication or lack thereof to the residential channel, and he was happy to take that question and look forward to sharing his thoughts on that. Did of course stop by the Savant booth, as everybody knows. Full disclosure, I'm a Savant dealer at Harrison Home Systems in Denver. So it was good to chat with them. I, as we talked about on the show, was just at the dealer conference for Savant not even a month ago. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks. So I'm very up to speed with what they're doing and what's on the roadmap. And honestly, none of that new stuff was being shown here. So they may have had it up maybe in like a private area to give people a sneak peek. But they did mention they've got a dealer conference here in Europe, I believe, coming up within the next week or two.
Yeah, I saw Julie in one of her stories mention a couple of things, including shades, which I hadn't seen before announced. So sounds like Savant's getting into the roller shade market, which is
they
pretty
are
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one at the dealer conference that surprised the crowd. That was sort of the to put it in like an Apple analogy. That was kind of their one more thing, right? The big thing they saved for after lunch when everyone came back in or whatever. So that was surprising. They're using a nice it's a nice product. They're not reinventing the wheel, and they're doing. I think they're going at it from the right angle, and so I look forward to seeing how that goes. I don't know. I'm not sure how many people are going to like. Lutron is just so well established and so well known for shades, and I think a lot of people it'll be hard for them to pull them away from doing Lutron. But who knows? I think it from a business standpoint, it makes sense to Savant to try to take a run at it, and we'll see how it goes. But like I said, they were really what they were showing down on the floor was really sort of a repeat of CEDIA. So didn't spend a lot of time walking around the booth, but I did chat with one of the gentlemen there. I had a chance to ask him, how he felt about Bob Madonna's return to the company and what that means for Savant. And I did get that recorded, so look forward to sharing that next week.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I saw a couple pictures on tweets go by with you hanging around with Raphael from Neo. Are they shipping yet?
That's the million. He has got to be so tired of hearing that question. I'm told that they're very, very close. I can't remember the details. I think I may have got him on a soundbite explaining it, but the long and the short of it is, it does sound to me like they are right there. Certainly, I'm sure he's as ready as anyone.
Right.
He's probably very, very tired of having to answer that question. But I think that it speaks at least to a commitment to quality, and so you got to give them that. They just weren't prepared to ship a remote that they didn't feel like 100% like it was ready and perfect and good to go to market with. So you got to give them credit for that. And they've stuck to their guns there. They're dedicated to getting it right, getting it out there correctly the first time. So I give them props for that. And just had a lot of fun. They're really it sounds like just have a ton of momentum there. There's a ton of excitement. I got to meet they brought out some of the engineers, so younger guys that came out with them, and got to meet a bunch of those guys. Really, really nice, cool people. Was honored to be invited to go to dinner with those guys, and Chris Pinder from HD Anywhere was there as well with some of his guys, and they're doing some really cool things that we'll talk about next week. Not just in the HDMI distribution space, and even not just, they're doing some cool things with control as well, but even outside of that, they've got a new venture set up that's sort of like a distribution type of model, and like product distribution, some partnerships that they're doing, and we can dive into that next week. But really good guys. Had a good time going out with them. And Amsterdam is a great city. Really good food, great beer scene, really good craft beers and all that. So just a lot of fun. Really fun to be out here.
How are the monkey nuts?
Well, that's tonight. Actually, that's tonight is the big live install thing, and actually that reminds me, Control 4's party is tonight, and we actually didn't really touch on them. So just quickly, I did get a chance to chat with them. Brad Hinsey, who we've had on the show a couple of times, got to catch up with him and talk about some of the new stuff that they're doing, and a lot of these companies too. I should mention that we spoke with at CEDIA when I interviewed them out here. It was fun to just chat with them about what are some of the unique aspects of the European market, and what are some of the challenges there. So really enjoyed that. Tonight's a challenge socially. I've got dinner I'm going to here with the guys from Krika and Zapiti, and look forward to that. And then beyond that, there's a number of different things going on. I don't know, Seth Rubenstein, correct?
Yes.
Rubenstein.
Oh, yes, yeah. I do.
Yeah, he's kind of an industry legend, and he's doing his seriously good karma thing that I think a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with. And And so that's going on tonight, Control 4 party, and then the live install Monkey Nuts thing, and then the Krika dinner, Krika and Zapiti that I'm going to. So I'm not sure. I certainly am not going to be able to do all of those. And I'm still kind of
survive?
Yeah, well, certainly, yeah. That tonight's the night that that could be a challenge. But yeah, I think most likely the live install thing will probably win out. That community has been really supportive of the show, and I really just think it would be fun to go out and meet some of them. I got to meet Chris Gamble on the show floor today, and that was fun to finally meet him face to face. We've corresponded so many times and had him on the podcast and have always emailed back and forth and stuff. And so to finally meet him and his wife was really awesome.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, glad you're having a good time out there, and glad you were able to go check out ISE 2017 this year in Amsterdam.
Yeah. Yeah. Hoping you and I can both come next year, try to make this an annual thing, because it really is a great show. Just a really good energy, very cool city. So it's a really good time out here. Very nice.
Very nice. Well, Jason, you need to go get some rest for tonight.
Yes. Yeah. Sounds like I'd be well advised to do that. And I think I am. It's about 5:00 here local time, so the show floor is open for another hour. But this was just a good excuse to get away, get off my feet for a little bit, and come do this episode with you. It's been a lot of fun, and yeah, I think I'll follow your advice there and go get a little bit of rest here before the evening.
All right, man. Have a drink for me.
All right, you got it. Thanks, Seth, and look forward to chatting with you next week.
All right, talk to you next week.
All right, man.